各位观众朋友，大家晚上好，欢迎来到我们这个6州州选的特备节目。那今天呢，我们这一段访问呢会以英文来进行，主要的呢就是要谈马来选民对这一次6州州选有怎么样的一个反应。当然，我们也知道说，这个所谓的绿潮，在上一届大选之后，这所谓的绿潮一直是大家非常关注的一个课题。到底这一次的州选呢，各州的马来选民又会展示出怎么样的表现？我觉得也是非常值得大家关注的。那今天的这个直播访问呢，我们邀请了2位嘉宾，2位都是学者、研究人员，都会我相信都会有非常就是精彩的内容可以跟大家分享。当然秉持着我们一贯节目的这个特色呢，非常欢迎大家在留言区留言提出你们的疑问。那废话不多说了，我就展开我们今天的这个直播。Hi, good evening. So I'm your host today. I'm Li Chin, and joining me today, I think, to talk about how will the Malay voters vote tonight is actually Dr. Noor Nirwandy from Center for Media and Information Warfare Studies in UiTM. Doctor, you have written a lot about this PRN and the social media warfare that's been ongoing. I think tonight you can share more about this. And of course, another one is one of our our guests before, Dr. Rais Hussin from EMIR Research. I'm sure this time around you have a lot more to tell us about the PRN. But I really like to start our conversation today with one question. It's very general. I think it has been close to a week since the nomination starts and we enter into the campaign period for the PRN. So what is your read of the general sentiment, or in particular the Malay voters, since this is our topic today? So, Doctor, you want to start?
Right, sure. Thank you very much for the question. I think generally if we look into what happenings in the coming election, the state election is quite interesting because we are looking to decouple of election, meaning the gap of elections between the federal election and state election. I think it's around 8 months, plus minus around 8 months. So this gives the reason for the public to have what we call the cooling periods, the voters to have the cooling periods in looking into what's the best for the country, deciding for the state, 6 states, what going to be the outcome of the 6 states election. So recently we look into the first weeks of what happenings around. I think it's quite quiet to me. Physically it's quite quiet. There are some places, of course, there are some campaigns, there are a few candidates that come in and looking into their supporters, grassroots, but physically I think it's quite quiet because of the factor of this decouple of elections. The gap of election is quite there, so it's make people a little bit more to be passive on politics. So passive politics can become 2 outcomes. One is people have lost interest in politics. The other one that people are physically not ready or don't want to be in the physical conditions of looking into what's the political campaign, to be in the speeches, to be around the political activities. So this gives the situation of passive politics. But if we look in the context of the social media, it is quite interesting because it's quite active in social media. And the activity of social media basically is there, the hype in Twitter, this hype in TikTok, Facebook, and all the element of social media, and it generates quite numbers of interest of the public to participate in receiving all the elements of the social media campaigns, doctrinations, propaganda, is that the word? And so that's one of the elements that happenings in social media. So we are still looking into the trend, but basically I think it's quite a very fair elements of elections now. February, of course, I think the government have the age, the Kerajaan Perpaduan have some age in terms of representations in getting the papers or some information in the news, in the social media. But in the participations of the people, the voters itself, I think we're also seeing a pattern of trend of actively involve people in the opposition. I'm talking about 3 states, different states, different form of opposition and different form of government. So this is making things generally quite interesting. But physically, I would say that a little bit more passive of politics. It's too early to tell. But maybe we are seeing a forecasting effect of low voter turnouts just to pick it up later on. But I think that won't be one of the reasons for us to look into that, whether this will be a very low voter turnout campaign, still will be a very high voter turnout campaign, because the last election I think square about 74, the PRUs, the 15 I think is around 82 if I'm not mistaken. So when we have Johor and Melaka during the COVID elements, 55, 65. So we're looking into that numbers as well.
55, 65, that's super low actually for us.
But it's early to tell. But generally, I would say that that's basic sentiment that we have in terms of physical surrounding and conditions for now.
This PRN.
For the PRN.
Okay. So what do you think, Dato'?
Well, politics, politician and elections are a good source of comedy and humor. So I think we are, all of us, keeping everything aside, we should enjoy the moments of comedy. Having said that, I cannot disagree with what Doc just have said. I think we are going to see a moderating voters turnout. I think EMIR Research got it impeccably right in the GE15, where we forecasted a 77% voters turnout, and that's exactly what happened. And EMIR Research are conducting a weekly poll for the last 5 weeks. Every Friday we will get these details, and it is showing that there will be an element of moderating of the voters turnout. That's number one. Why? I think a lot of them are actually, the youth for instance, are working outside their respective states. Despite the fact of free buses and free this and free that, whether it's worth them to go back and to vote again, when they know that it is not going to have any impact on the federal government, it is going to be more of a state government. So there are some concerns along the line, and voters, young voters is now about 40% or so, and that's a huge number. So I think, these are the real problems. Although some parties have said that if you don't come and vote, you cannot go to heaven. So that's, you know, every time, I think the easiest way is you vote and you vote us, you go to heaven. And you know, that's the thing. Now, coming to in terms of sentiments, we all know that, and EMIR Research have done this every quarter on the polls. So we need to really recalibrate, review this thing. And last but not least, this is the average 92-93% that people want, is the affordable and quality homes, housing. And we know there are empty houses, empty apartments, but at the same time there are people who do not have houses and they rent. So I think by and large, if the administration, the present administration is working pragmatically on this 5 front, and of course the innovation agenda that Raf always talks about and Anwar talks about, but at the same time it must yield the results and people must feel it. The challenge is just 7 months, right? So many people are saying, oh, they have not done anything, but
too quick.
33 years you can't even provide a clean water. So sometimes you need to think rationally. But by and large, the campaign that is going to happen, next 1 week is going to be very, very critical. 1 week before the election is going to be the campaign intensity that you have never seen. The gegenpress of the campaign will be massive. Millions of money will be poured in social media, TikTok and this and that, and to try to capture the voters. Now, sometimes what you promise, even in fact there was one candidate who said, I'm not going to talk about my manifesto, I'm going to reveal the manifesto after I win. Oh yeah? Wow. So, you know, but these things gain traction. Sometimes comedians draws a lot of laughter. It's a good feeling. You go ceramah, oh these aku ni hang ni apa. All these things draw laughter, draw a good time, eat some Ramly burgers and then go back. But are they going to provide development? What are they in these 5 areas? That is the question the voters must ask. I think more discerning voters in the urban setting and also many in the rural now understand the development is very important and we need that. So I think we may see some trajectory change, but I do not think it will be too intense trajectory change.
Okay, I think just just rewind a little bit, because I think today our show is really to help our audience, mainly the Chinese community, to understand the Malay voter. I've recently some friends that call me and say, you know, because we are all like taken aback by what happened with Green Wave during the general election, the past general election. So sometimes when you see certain certain statements or certain videos being circulated on social media, right, then my friend actually called me and said, I can't believe that the Malay voters will buy into this. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like, maybe we can dissect the Malay voters a little bit with your knowledge and insights. Like, just help us understand a little bit. I don't think it can be generalized, because the urban Malays and the rural Malays, or does class really matter between them? Maybe the B40 are more inclined towards a certain factions and stuff like that. So maybe can we just understand a little bit more about the Malay voters, especially at this juncture when they're going to cast their votes? Which demographic do you think we should really watch out for, or, you know, they are really kind of like decisive, or you know, they're going to make some very a lot of impacts on the outcome of the general election? I'm not so sure, in particular of these 6 states. Perhaps, Doctor, you would like to share some of your thoughts.
It's a very good question to ask when we talk about the demographic of Malay voters, but I think you have to go back to the root of the history of the country. If you look back into our country on how we reached our independence, of course, UMNO was heavily involved in that, because that's how the basically independence was made up. UMNO, then we have MIC, MCA, Ikatan joining and developing a coalition of party in our country. And from that matter on, I think we have developed a kind of party-based system. So this party-based system is termed as a giant party of the country. So we have the giant party of the country. We have like UMNO, we have IMIC, we have MCA, then we have DAP, then we have Barisan Alternatif, Perikatan, and then we got PKR and so on. And then we have PAS. So basically this giant party of the country, they have strong supporters, grassroots supporters that were with them from the early establishment, and this is what I think you'll be hearing the word from Dato', the multi-level staff of the party system. But I think this is the foundations of how the country evolved in terms of political structure. And these representations of party system is, whether we like it or not, is based on some racial integrations and some race issue. We have the Malay with the UMNO and the PAS, then we have the AP and MCA with the Chinese, and we have MIC with Indian. Of course, PKR is a bit more open to all the multiracial community in the country. But the grassroots element of this party in our country is always based on this racial centric. And this development of racial centrics have becoming one of the common element in patterning our political structure, political identity, in fact, political strategy. So the governing of PN for quite some time also developed the same elements of what we call the racial integrations, but it's still based on strong giant blocks of race-based party. So when things started to depart between BN and so on, then we are seeing branches of party coming out here and there, some coalitions historically part of that. But there will never be a kind of separation from this race-based party system in our country. Alright, to dwell into that, to look into that representation, we have to understand that because of the structures of the community in the country, because Malay, basically the Malay dominance in the countries, and of course we have the federal constitution and Rukun Negara and everything to bind every race together to live harmoniously. But because of this representation of this giant party, it works by block. And when UMNO receives some strong degradation because of some issues internally, whether it's true or not is secondary, but when it receives a kind of that image, that little bit tarnish of the image and degradations of UMNO, so we're seeing a huge blocks of giant Malay voters pattern that is being scrambled up. I mean, there are some divisions among them. Eventually, it's still important to have this party structure, and then we see the rise of the green wave, the PAS. And this PAS also is based on the strong representations of Malay structures, block system, party. Hierarchically, you can call it multi-level, you can call it anything, but it's still based on the same dominant form of system. So we have two parties here. We have the UMNO, we have then the PAS. And this representation shows that the Malay need a Malay party for them to be in in regardless of whatever the political situation in the country. And interestingly enough, you can see the same thing happening with MCA and DAP, because these basically are some studies saying that those people who love to involve in politics basically only the Malay and Chinese. Alright, like I'm not saying that the Indians not basically not active in politics, because these two basically community of parties, they are so close with politics.
Correct.
So because of this situation, the algorithm or the equation is quite simple. When we have two different blocks of party, which is MCA and DAP, and then we have UMNO and PAS, the basic blocks of this ideology principle of the party in Malaysia, that we need to have a strong party of a Malay party, and then we need to have a strong party of a Chinese-based party. And this become one of the main domains of discussion, study of the politics that we have to acknowledge. Whether we like it or not, this is the reality of some elements of race-based politics in our country. Of course, then we have PKR, open up things, we have Bersatu, we have all the elements, but this is always, Malaysia is always based by this giant-based politics structure. So to accommodate to that situation, when there are conflicts in Malay representations of politics, so there be a kind of shift, not a bigger like tectonic shift. It might be kind of tectonic, kind of shift, but quite a major shift. So then we are seeing the shift of the tendency of the voters that still believe in this equation that there must be a strong Malay party and there must be a strong Chinese party. And this equation has been hunting our political backyard for quite some time. I'm not talking about the leader, I'm talking about the supporters. I'm talking about the grassroots party, I'm talking about the normal people. And of course, the party members is much more obsessed with this compared to the normal extraordinary people. Of course, the urban people are a bit more likely to open up. But it has been developed about so long, and this pattern has started to become a dominant form of our political belief structure, idea, beliefs and values. So this cognitive of politics of race-based system has to be acknowledged. And I'm not saying it's good and correct, but it's there. It's kind of like a culture representation that when we talk about politics, these have to be around. So this is all the giant part. And when we talk about giant party, there must be a strong Chinese party politics, there must be a strong Malay-based party politics. And this is the question we go on. And I think when the green wave happens, we're talking about that PRN 15, although I do believe that in coming state election, it will be a little bit more cushioned down, a little bit more mellow, because of people have much time to look into the developments of economy Madani, on how the Prime Minister, unity government.
So you do think that the green wave is going to tame down?
Because momentously, I think there's lots of issues here. Let's say I've talked about, I've given statements, some media, of course, it's all over the media during the last election. I said it's TikTok election, right? So TikTok election, basically we talk about around 6 million voters. I think Dato' have the numbers as well. We talk about around 2 million the new voters, then the 18 undi muda around 2 million, then the rest is new voters. So they are looking into on how to find election information. So basically they are using on TikTok. But they are finding informations based on the same equation by finding the strong Malay party system for them to vote. And this equation has been stabilized within the MCA and the AP. We are quite settled on that. But when there are conflicts of Malay decision making between UMNO and PAS, so TikTok has becoming a platform for them to get all the knowledge of their party. And it happened that PAS at that particular time is riding on this particular wave. So if we stretch the discussion, we talk about the algorithms of the TikTok, because it's been seen that TikTok is so sophisticated, not to praise TikTok, but we talk about political element here. The element of TikTok, that when we talk about TikTok is basically identifying that what PAS is doing as part of campaign is equivalent to what the Malay love to read on political, not non-political element, such as ceramah agama, discussions about life. So this algorithm keep the bubble of PAS automatically within the same bubbles of Malay community religious values.
So the content that go viral might not be directly.
So there are two hypotheses here. One said that they invest much, they are good in that. The other thing is that it's automatically being their advantage without, might be they are raising it, not raising it, but as information warfare practitioners, as security and political analysts, I do find it quite interesting, because they are like giving a huge form of gold mines during the PRN 15, and they are in there. And the gold mine supposedly to be where the people try to find the good things. So eventually they receive an automations of recognition based of this unique algorithm of TikTok, and they are riding on these advantages. And for this PRN, basically people started to realize that, but how strong are people to realize that, then it will get to that. So that explains to all the people, all the listeners in a glance, why we still have this equation, and why we have this momentously that people still want to be in that stronghold. In that we talk in football, there must be like this team from Real Madrid to Barcelona, Chelsea to Liverpool. They need to be some team for them to support. And this is only based by this two-party system. And the same thing is happening on the MCA, the IP on the side. Just forget the analogy for them to better impart that. And then we talk about automation system, but whether it's keep on going, whether it keep on repeating, is subject to what we're going to see in the coming PRN.
Yeah, interestingly, because I think, Doctor, you mentioned one very good point. You talk about TikTok, right? So I'm going to move a little bit to the younger demographic, because after only 18, we see a wave of new voters coming into. Dato, what do you think about the younger voters, the young Malay voters? How are they going to impact this upcoming PRN? Are they going to vote differently from how they did what they did, because there is a pattern that they tend to support PN in the last general election. When we look into the different saluran of the votes, then there's a pattern that's coming out from it. But I don't know, maybe EMIR has something to share when it comes to the younger Malay votes.
See, I would always say that democracy is not a perfect system. Yeah? After all, democracy at one time gave us Adolf Hitler as the German president, and you know what he did to the world. So to rely on democracy totally for the country is not completely a thing that we need to think about. Number one. Number two, in Malaysia we have something called Majlis Raja-Raja, the institution of the royalty, right? So that gives and provides some elements of check and balance between the use and abuse of democracy with their intervention. I think we saw that in the last G15, how swiftly the Yang di-Pertuan Agong came in and followed whatever the constitution says. I think that we need to be mindful. And thirdly, the Malay anchor party is always something that has been advanced in any political discourse, and also in publicly. Oh, kalau tidak Melayu hilang itu, Melayu hilang ini. So that is something. And the politics of fear is what some of these identity politics of race and religion parties used to the tilt. So you know identity politics of race and religion. When you talk about race, inculcate the fear of losing Malay this, Malay that. When you talk about religion, say, the whole Malaysia is going to become a Christian. So the thing is, when you look at this, we know that is not true, right? Because why? The present administration, for instance, signed on to all the 5 under Article 153, Islam, Bahasa, the royalty, this and that. It's there, right? Only that when it comes to the interaction with the voters, be it the young savvy voters with multimedia, like with social media, that seemed to little bit diluted, that message. So the message still goes what? Malays are losing this. Tun Mahathir, for instance,
yes,
I used to work with him. So he said recently that the Malay reserve land is down to 12%, generally speaking, from 50%.
Correct.
So the question to ask him is, you were Prime Minister for 22 years, what did you do, right? So again, you need cherry pick some statistics here and there, and then you inculcate fear, and then people, and then you get people to fight each other. You know, it becomes, when I say fight each other, means they disagree with that, creating disharmony among the society. Malaysia is actually DNA designed by God to succeed. We are very rich in resources, you name it, we have. We have excellent people, Malay, Chinese, Indians, Mama Putra like me, and many other people in Malaysia. And talented people, right? But what happened to this country, and suddenly we have 1.5 trillion ringgit of debt? Why do we have that debt in such a rich country? Recently, a brigadier in Niger, African country, he said what he said in his speech: Niger is so rich with uranium and gold, but we are the poorest in Africa. Why? So my question today is maybe the same line. We are rich resources country. We have everything. We have rich talent, rich resources. Why we have 1.5 trillion ringgit in debt? There we saw, EMIR Research have published this, which was 7 professors and 5 different universities peer-reviewed that particular research on the loss of monies due to corruption and leakages over a period of 26 years at 4.5 trillion ringgit. Now these are all big money. What happened? So for somebody who have been helming the country for 22 years, now to come and say, you know, this, something we need to ponder. And for someone who spent all his life, right, maybe the last 2 months, except the last 2 months, all his life condemning PAS, including when we formed the Bersatu,
yes, suddenly
wearing a PAS outfit and coming up. So we need to understand why. Why is this happening? To me, I think hopefully the Malaysian, especially the Malays, will realize that cukup lah, you know, enough. If you look at all the affirmative policy, new economic policy, Bumiputra policy, I'm fully supportive of it. In terms of policy, I'm fully supportive of it. In terms of execution, it was a dismal failure. Why? You look at all the parameters. Have we achieved it? No. The only thing, the graph that shows up is youth unemployment. So if you are listening to this conversation, you must decide that if you want to continue to this kind of policies that, I'm not talking about the policy, the execution of the policy, then you have a problem. So I think it is high time the youth must go beyond beautiful girls with nice music background on the TikTok, asking them to vote somebody, then to think about their future. I think it is high time. This country cannot go through this particular trajectory. 1.5 trillion ringgit in debt. Nanti we may not even have money to pay the OPEX, the operating expenditure of the country. We cannot do that anymore. So I think with Anwanomics ataupun this inclusive market economy approach, I think things are beginning to happen. And this is the narrative that the Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional have to communicate to the people. It's not easy. So many people like said, hey, Pakatan Harapan was always fighting corruption. Even now, Datuk Sri Anwar every 3 days talks about corruption. Because corruption is a big problem in this country. It used to be a problem. Today, it is no longer a problem. It is a way of life. We need to change that. So I think Anwar Ibrahim become a prime minister, what, 7 months now, 8 months? Bagilah sedikit waktu to change. You've been having the state for 33 years. You can't even clean the water, and you complain too much about this. Why I'm saying all this? As a Malaysian, I want this country is actually belong to everyone. Kan? We know this. I'm a Mama Putra. Our doctor here is a Melayu Putra. There's a China Putra, there's a India Putra, there's a Bengali Putra, there's all what do you call Iban Putra, you have a Dusun Putra, you have a Kadazan Putra. We are all Putra. This Malaysia is ours. We need to work hard to do this. Do not allow some self-serving politician to come and tell you stories. This guy is doing this, this guy is doing that, and then use policies to benefit the 1%. If you look at who benefited among the Malays, I'm talking about, who benefited? I'm asking this to the youth, orang muda-muda ni, who benefited? It's just the 1%. Who are these? So you go and look at there. So I think it is high time that we need to start move away from this identity politics of race and religion. There are sufficient studies in the world and even in Malaysia. We've proven beyond the shadow of doubt that whenever there's an identity politics of race and religion is thriving, corruption is very high. Because under religion, under race, you can justify anything. You don't vote us, you go to hell. You vote us, you go to paradise. You get 71 virgins, 72 virgins. You see? So it's very simple correlation. I'm a party Islam, is it? They call themselves Party Islam. Yeah. Party Islam. So you don't vote a party that is Islam, you are kafir. You go to hell. But what type of Islam brand that you are bringing? Islam is love. Islam is inclusive. Islam is colorblind. Islam is progressive. Islam wants economic development. Islam wants clean water. Islam wants employment for the youth. Islam wants peace, full harmonious existence. So I think the youth beginning to be aware. Parti Muda is one example that is moving that. I think AMK in Keadilan is doing the same thing. That the DAP guy, man, speaks impeccable Malay, Howard. This guy is also, so we are beginning to find the new political figures and leaders who eventually, hopefully, will recalibrate the entire thought process. If not, this country will have a big problem. And I think my message to the youth, and from our reading, even in EMIR research, we do not see much shift in the youth when you vote in the rural area, because they are somehow encapsulated to the way they are, meaning which you nak Islam ke ataupun you nak air, meaning you want Islam or water. You see, so and this works with them. And then there should be some beautiful girl with a green tudong and a white, that's it, story done. And then DAP ini communist. And I cannot believe in year 2023 they're still talking about DAP as communist. You know, when communists even gone everywhere in the world. So I think I think Pakatan Harapan and I think Barisan Nasional should play a bigger role in reorientating the people of Malaysia to do the right thing. I think BN has been doing extensively for decades on DAP, right? So now it's you know, when I see the BN and the Pakatan Harapan guys together, I feel, wow, this can happen. This has happened. Isn't this good for the country? Everyone working towards the progress and prosperity of the country. This we talk about equitable shared prosperity in the truest sense of the word. Tapi tak ada, dulu bergaduh. Oh, itu ni. I think things have to change. But to do that, I think my good friend Fahmi, the Minister of Communication Multimedia, whatever the new name is, every time it changes.
Communication and digital.
Digital, okay. Communication and digital. And all others, the respective must start talking about an inclusive Malaysia. Malaysia for all. You know, Malaysia where everybody peacefully coexisting, recognizing the constitution, the Article 153, meaning Islam, Bahasa, the royalty, the special, this all don't touch. That's the constitution, right? And I think no one touches that. DAP is not touching that, PKR is not touching that, the Pakatan Harapan guys are not touching that, Muda is not touching that. The only one who's touching that, invoking that all the time is this PAS and a party that I was involved in the forming, Bersatu. Now, unfortunately, I think we need to move away from this, because if you want this country to be developed, progressive, and you know, you need to move away from this.
Okay, but my read is, I think the unity government or DAP or even PKR are very reserved towards you know, talking about Malaysia for all. I think because the sentiment or the narrative, they are not dominating the narrative in a way. It's being dominated by the other side, by PAS or by TikTok, on TikTok and all this narrative there. So I think maybe, you know, that's how in politics the way that it's being, they are responding towards whoever that's dominating the narrative, and that's why you see people like Sanusi is actually stealing all the light.
Sanusi who? No, seriously, which Sanusi are you talking about?
I'm talking about the one that's being charged recently. That's like
that guy is, I always call him as a free stand-up comedian. So, you know, that's what I feel about him, because he doesn't bring anything to the table. The only thing, he goes around shouting, you know, this, that, accusing everyone under the sky. And anybody accusing everybody under the sky, when somebody brings him to the court, he said, don't go to the court, pentas politik, pentas politik. But when somebody attacks him, he is going to the court. So, you know, I mean, this is precisely the problem. How can we have this kind of people as leaders? In past, there are many good guys too. In past, there are many good guys, qualified, professional, competent, and so on. Why put a comedian like him here? That's shocking.
It's so interesting. We went onto the street and interviewed some Malay people, and then we were told that, yeah, this Sanusi is doing a great thing. He's defending certain stuff. Then we were like, wow, okay. So
I think the big idea is go back to the root of the problems, and when there are fear, we have to address the fear. I mean, there are fear from both ends. There are fear from the Malay community, in the sense that what you mentioned just now, particularly from the Bloc Party, they are so obsessed with the representations of this fear, and of course the fear of the non-Malay, of seeing this kind of patterns that might weaken them from seeing that this is not good for the country, it's not good for our stability and harmony. I think the root of the problem is the failure of us to have a single ideology that based on our principle of Rukun Negara and the Federal Constitution. When Suruhanjaya Reid established our great Federal Constitutions, and then we have 1974 been gazetted our Rukun Negara to address some critical problem, the 1969 issues and some of the related issues of political situation during that day, I think it's about time for us to raise a new standard, to put up new standards of how the ideology based on Rukun Negara Federal Constitution have to be obsessed by all the people of Malaysia. And I'm on the one who put up in writing that say all the politicians have to go through a special course in order for them to become politicians. Modul keselamatan negara, some basic elements of national security, because I'm also looking into special national security expert. And one of the elements that raised my concern about national security is the failure of us to have the single ideology. So when we are not giving all the mission people the same elements of knowledge, the same elements of understandings, what's supposed to be the ideology of the country. So if I ask you and other of all the friends around, I mean, talk about all the races, any people, party, the background, they fail to understand this. They say, yes, we have Rukun Negara, we have national anthem, but that's not ideology. Ideology is bringing into one consideration that there are some situations that we cannot change, some situations we have to adapt, some situations we have to progress. And these have to be reflected into this fundamental element that supposedly have to be done by those who are involved in this particular system. Of course, credit to have been given to Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, the Malaysia Madani, because when I studied the Malaysia Madani principle and concern, we are saying that a new patterns of Malaysia Madani, because it's not about Malaysia Madani itself. It's basically about lifestyle or a form of civilization, but you have to start from a base, and that base is the younger generation. So this is, it might sound a little bit like utopia, rhetorical, I've been using that word for so many times, but again, I think it's achievable. So we need to go back, in order to distance this fear from all the community, particularly whether it's representation, the Chinese, the Indian, the Malay, or all the race in our country. We need to develop this element, and this particular element is what we call the test ground for this incoming election, whether the Malaysian Madani concept been accepted by the publics, the unity governments to look into the civilizations, the new elements of order, or how people should react among each other. And until we fail to find these amicable elements, strong elements of considerations to distance this fear. So there always be a kind of doubt. When your relationship, talking about relationship now, a little bit, we also have some specialization in relationship element, but they'll be on our next program later, right? But when we talk about relationship, of course, when we there as a doubt in relationship, so we started to have this suspicious.
Yes.
Whether it's a small family, whether it's between a couple, whether it's between husband and wife. So we're talking about millions
communities.
We're talking about the suspicious of people around us. So why? So is that going to happen? This is going to happen. So why is happening? We have the Federal Constitution, we have the Rukun Negara. We're not supposed to touch about the issues of 3R. We're not supposed to touch about all the fundamentals, but it keep on happening. Because why? The fear is still exists from both ends. from the multiple effects in our system and community. So this is our job. This is the Malaysian Madani progression. I think it's quite beautiful for us to wake up. To have this wake up call for us. I mean, this kind of talk show is good. So hopefully this PRN will have some changing of this element. Perhaps when the youth are started to be in this decoupled election, after 7 months they say, oh, this is not good. This is something bad. This is something not working for the respective element of unity. So it's not about unity government. It's basically unity of people, and it happens that unity government for now have the solution to the Malaysian Madani. For now, it might be valid for the next 5 years. Then we can move on from there. But it have to be by this strong substance. And we lack of this substance. We have Malaysian Madani, but we need that ideological substance. We need to develop that substance.
Yeah.
And the one who fosters the fears is not among the people.
Yes.
Me and another person on the street, we are not fearful to each other. No. It is a politician. And the politician who could not administer the country, who could not solve the problem, but they want to remain as a relevant and leadership. You know, in the history of Islam, for instance, people get very afraid to become a leader. When Prophet Muhammad SAW, our Prophet, passed away, and they got together to appoint the caliphate, who's the next caliph, all of the candidates were telling, you become the caliph, you become the caliph, you become the caliph. Nowadays, comedians wants to be the leader. That's the problem. And the last time a country has a comedian as a leader is war in Russia. Zelensky is a comedian. Okay? So if Sanusi is seen as a whatever that they are talking about, I'm amazed. Has he come to you with one solution? No need to talk 5 solutions. Just one solution. I'll give you an example. Paddy farming. Are you aware that we are, I mean, officially the data says 63% we are self-sufficient. But that's not the true data. The true data is 48%. The delta we are importing. The rest are all we importing. Today, how many times that you harvest paddy in Kedah? How many times? In Skinchan, they're doing it 5 times every 2 years. Now, what are you doing in Kedah? Have you brought the agri-tech? Have you brought the technology? Have you done the soil study to make sure targeted fertilization? This is something that is important. Instead, I want to annex Penang to Kedah. This is a comedy.
I think picking up to Datuk points, I can't hold myself about this, because we talk about elements of radicalism, extremism in politics. Politics is supposed to be naturally a very nice elements of democratization of the people. You talk about socio-economics. So what's about how you're going to talk about irrigation system, water systems, community elements, inflation. It should be an open debate. It should be at a town hall. People keep on giving opinion, debating on what works well. But look what's happening. We are debating about something, we are shouting about everything, and it's kind of the elements of politician radical. Datuk can mention the name, I will not mention the name for sure. But of course there is different orientation. So when this happening, we have the elements of radical extremism. So is this the politics that we want to inherit to the next generation? Is this how the new voters, muda 18, Seundi 18 going to see this? Is this the way of how we're going to elect leaders? So I think we are basically quite off track. We got quite backwards. So the elements of radicalism, extremism. So you have to be fully diplomatic. You have to be fully elements of pride and honor to serve the people. And to talk about this, I think, I'm not sure how many years it take us to be in this kind of political situations. But I think, again, the Madani might be a way to move forwards. Because it looks into some complexity of civilization. But when we talk about this element of radicalism, the end of radicalism, according to all the elements that are happening around us, is basically physical interactions.
So it's good that you mentioned a few times, Doctor, you mentioned a few times about Malaysia Madani, because we have an audience that actually asked, right? So I think he's addressing the question to both of you. Like, so far from your observation, is the Malay community receptive towards the unity government coalition? In general, because I think Dato also mentioned about corruption. I think one of the ills that we talk about with this current government, we have a DPM who is laden with corruption charges. It's in court. I mean, that's a fact. That's in public. So how does this issue of corruption, and how important it is to the Malay voters?
I think we are still trapped in the bubbles of Malay community. We look on the political leader, political figure. I think in our country, not exactly in the form of representation of race-based politics in our country. And when the image of Datuk Seri Ibrahim came in, popped in, of course, initially it gave good response to the public to feel confident of that. Then we have Malaysia Madani. And Malaysia Madani had been seen as the other logo slogan of what had been the political logo slogan before, but actually it's a way of lifestyle, a way of civilization, of how it works. And it's quite hard to digest it, for the public to digest it, when give a strong resolution, strong elements, applications, because people are basically looking into what they have on the table, how many cash they will have hold in the pockets. So basically the concept is not to say it's quite huge. It has a lot of substance that have to be translated into operative element, such as the rahmah, such as the economic madani. But again, just to talk to the people who ask questions, the individual, it's about lifestyle. It's bringing a concept of a new civilization of way on how you should interact with others, how you should respect others, how you should combat corruption. So that's the major theme here. But again, it is symbolized, it is been indexes, it has been calculated, it has been translated, it has been shown that for it to work, we have to talk about the grocery products. We have to talk about what are kind of the people have in terms of liquidity of cash. It is important because some people on the street will say that we're not interested in that. We're much interested on what we have in our hand. How many money that we can have by the end of the month? How many can we save? Do we have any? Can we buy houses based on Dato research of 5 elements of index parameters? Yes. But again, that is Malaysia Madani. So if we, the governments, be able to reflect these two situations. One is to make sure all the operative element works well, and the other is building up the civilization's ideology, philosophy of lifestyle perfectly. No such thing as perfect government, at least adequately enough for this term. I think then people could see the reflections what Madani is about. But the things that when we talk about little bit of civilization, then we talk about food on table. Of course, people choose food on table. So I think that's the huge comparison that we have. But the representation of Madani have to look into this impactful element on how to bring us away from this element, but again at the same time settling the operative mechanical terms of people economics, liquidity of cash, high prices, food products, services, houses, and all of that.
Yeah.
My view is very simple. Zahid is always mentioned as a big issue in the present administration. But everyone should remember, sometimes you have to keep your friends close, your enemy closer. And by doing so, you'll be able to actually restrict and restrain more damage or harm done to the nation. And then what about the alternative? Assuming that UMNO today is not with this unity government, the unity government will not be formed. So what is the alternative? You want to be with the other party who talks about 72 virgins and paradise all the time? So I think we need to be very mindful, and sometime in politics something called pragmatism. Having said that, the case is still ongoing. My genuine hope and sincere hope is that the judiciary must stay independent, must go through the process of law, and if he is guilty, give him that opportunity to defend himself in the Court of Appeal and then Federal Court and go on. Now, somebody will ask, hey, this guy is under charge with a prima facie. How come why is he not resigned? We look at Singapore. The moment somebody is investigated, they have to take leave or relief of his job. Okay, when did that culture start in Malaysia? If I ask that culture, has that culture started in Malaysia? Not yet. Madani just started, boss, 7 months, right? So it will take some time where people will have such an embarrassment for even being investigated and quickly resign or quickly take leave or leave of absence. So I think jangan cherry pick issues. Sometimes people cherry pick issues. So if that culture was never been in Malaysia, I'm not justifying that. I'm saying let's do it.
Yes.
Can every one of us do it? So my thing is very simple, even to the present opposition. He who is free from sin, cast the first stone. Can you? Semua ada juga 2 kali 5. So the thing is that to move away, to rebuild, to reinvent Malaysia, I think Madani is starting the process. We are at the tail beginning. Baru start ni, right? So suddenly, I want to change government. There is one guy, past guy, I mean with white copia on his head and beard till his knees, keep on talking about, oh, we are using democracy process to change the government. So what is your objective? Your objective is to change government, or is your objective is to administer the country so people will prosper, people will live harmoniously, consistent with the Islamic principle? Islam says what? Islam says you must be accountable, responsible. Don't go simply telling all kind of stories. Sanusi, if you're listening, please do the same. Stop telling all the stories. Do what is good for Kedah. Okay. You start implementing a new agri-tech policy for Kedah. You enhance the harvest. You do this fertilizer rationalization program. You don't over-fertilize the place. And then diversify your economy. Just not paddy, something else. Don't go too much on REE. That is in the long term bad for the country, bad for the state. Work closely with your neighbors. Perlis and Penang, constitutionally Penang existed as a Penang. So if you start focusing on what you can do, not focusing on, oh, since Penang is doing well, I want to take Penang. Tak boleh lah, kan? I think the best guy that I've worked with many people, Salahuddin Ayub, the one who just passed away. This guy is such a pragmatic guy, peaceful guy, and he truly is a rahmah to Malaysia. Unfortunately, in God's infinite wisdom, he was taken away. But be like him, right? Be the rahmah, be the mercy to the people. Don't go and whack that person, this person, Anwar is this, that. I mean, and of course I'm saying, this is all good. You go to comedy act in Bangsa or you know, that's nice. So again, I repeat, the last time you have a comedian as the president of the country, they are in war with Russia. So please do not repeat the same problem. Coming back to the Malay sentiments, I think the present government, Pakatan Harapan, Barisan Nasional, must do a little bit better in communication. Communicating what they are doing clearly, unambiguously, and then taking on certain things that has been told by opposition and explain that as well. Because the fear factor, fear factor is the only... People react to fear very emotionally, right? So that's why all the campaign in TikTok, as I told you, with the you know, with the background of recitation and prayers and everything, Orang Melayu telah, that's not true, boss. All the manjis gajah-gajah, you think they will, nothing can happen to the federal constitution without a consent of all the 9 rulers. Even if the parliament you change something, you still have to go back to the manjis gajah-gajah. So it's protection there. Constitution is protected. Military, siapa ada. Police, siapa ada. Civil service, siapa ada. So I think this fear factor is unnecessary. And I think all these opposition members who spreading this fear factor and apa semua tu, instead, okay, since now the people have given you the mandate to do the 5 years, let's work with you constructively. We will criticize you, but constructively, and let's make Malaysia a better place. As far as the 6 PRN is concerned, from our numbers for the last 5 weeks, we are looking at almost a status quo situation with a moderating voters turnout. I think that is what we are going to see. Penang, Negeri Sembilan and Selangor will stay. Kedah, Terengganu and Kelantan will stay as well with the PN. However, there's a caveat. There will be a little number increases here and there. So, for example, from Kedah, maybe there'll be another 1 or 2 seats for Pakatan Harapan. In Penang, there'll be 1 or 2 seats for Perikatan Nasional. Selangor will be maybe 3 or 4 more seats for in Selangor, 3 or 4 or maybe 5. It is from the last average numbers. Negeri Sembilan is like 1 or 2 seats. So I think you can see this pattern lah. But otherwise, there's not going to be much change. But probably the lawyers will be very rich after the election, because there'll be suits and counter suits.
Yeah. So I think our conversation has been ongoing for about an hour. I think as a conclusion, right, maybe we are a week to election, the voting day. As political observer or analyst, what are the developments that, both of you personally will be looking out for? And maybe you can share a little bit for this.
I think wrapping up the element of, I would love to see changing in what we call the element of the warfare, or in Malay we call like gerak saraf, perang saraf, all the information warfare related during election. Because I think it's time for us to move on. We have been trapped in this kind of information warfare campaigns, perang saraf activity. We come to elections with all the similar representation of campaign. It's about character assassinations, it's about condemning each other, about shouting, and now we have lots of more radical extremism element popping in. I think it's not healthy for the national politics. It's not healthy for our democracy system. I think we have to move on. We have to really part this. This is not part of us. This is not supposed to be part of our democratic modern society element. It's supposed to be about the people, but only it happens thing that people only votes once, and the rest is of course due to the politicians and what they can do for as a donor or MP. So I think this is what I'm looking into, the game changer, to look into a kind of leader that can motivate us to pull this around. So I think this is why I think it's quite considerate for us to at least to acknowledge Madani for a start. It might not be a perfect unity government, not be a perfect government, not be a perfect engineer, but at least it's not a motto. It's a kind of lifestyle civilization element. And of course, in order for that, we need also to see that lots of campaigning activities move into the socio-economics of people, so that people can know really what's in hand. Manifesto is not secret. Manifesto have to be tabled to the public, have to be debated. What people need to know have to be tabled to the public. People need to know what is the idea of choosing you as representation of my constituency. But what we have been having news. So this is again, I'm quite objecting to social media, because why? Social media have to, it's making us more small in a smaller cluster, but in a sense it's making us more nationalized and globalized. So we don't tend to give much focus on what we need in our constituency, because we are living in social media era. Meaning to say that we talk about national politics, we talk about regional issues, global issues, we talk about religious issues, all the elements of big elements of issues, but we fail to focus to the focal point, which is our own backyard. I think this is some of the new element that perhaps there might be a new form of environmental switch in information of politics. It sounds good, it sounds nice, but who's going to pick it up? And of course the audience also to motivate them to change. If we are participating in this 3R campaign, we are participating in this condemning action of politics, we also not upgrading ourselves. So get a copy of the Constitution, get a copy of the Negara, digest it well, and this is what we have to behold. And then I think we could be at least on a better track with the Madani concept. Otherwise, when I'm going to have in your talk show later on, we're going to discuss about same thing again. So I think this is, let's this PRN becoming a good start for the youth, for all the parties. When they cast their vote, they really cast for the future orientations of the country, not only because of these issues that have been sensationalized and emotionalized. Of course, we need that as human, but when we come to making decision, we have to make a good one. I think that's how I look into the current political situation for now.
Yes. I can only say that this is a federal, this is not a federal election, so you're not going to change federal government.
Yes.
This is a state election in 6 states. Worst come to worst, you'll be changing or reinstating in these 6 states. It is not going to have an implication on the federal level, number one. Number two, if you are state, you are in opposition, still okay. Work with federal. Kelantan, Terengganu is working very fine with the federal, and billions of ringgit has been allocated, especially flood mitigation stuff and so on. So I think when there's adab, in Islam, adab is very important. I think, Doctor, you can agree with me. Adab, in fact, Prophet Muhammad SAW was sent to this world as not only a guidance, but more importantly, perfection of adab. So I think adab must be maintained. So you, Sanusi, if you want things to happen, you need to also have the adab lah, right? Adab kan. So Kelantan Terengganu is enjoying it, right? Because they have a Menteri Besar who have adab. They know a little bit of Islam, not too much. But anyway, having said that, my expectation and I hope is that you know this is not going to change the federal government, it's the state government. That's number one. And number two, you want progress, you want prosperity, vote wisely. Ask the guys, ask the people who are standing for election, what are the 5 things you are going to tell, you're going to provide? 5 things. 5 things that you can see with the eyes and feel it. Not 72 virgins and paradise you cannot see yet. You probably will see it after your hereafter, but for now, ask 5 things that you're going to provide. If this guy is not talking about the 5 things, and then he wants to say that it is very secretive, it's an element of surprise, you must run 50,000 kilometers away from that candidate. That's about it. Please vote wisely, because our country cannot shoulder and take it anymore. We have a huge debt of 1.5 trillion ringgit. We need a stable government with the right economic direction, and now we are seeing it. Inclusive economy, market economy is taking place, the Anwanomics, and the Madani concept is taking place. So give chance. 5 years time, if it doesn't work, change lah. So you have the right. You can change. But meanwhile, keep changing like this. You will fear the foreign direct investors away. And again, the state election can have that implication as well. So if it's 3-3, I think it should not be a big issue. In EMIR research view, it is going to be 3-3 for now. We will wait for another 1 more week of poll. Right?
See what happens. Right?
Number one. Number two, if it's 3-3, it's still all right. Right? But if there's something else happens, then it may give some kind of like, okay, there's a challenge. The foreign direct investor will be like, we just got Elon Musk coming here. We just got the Infineon guys increasing their investment, billions of ringgit. And we are going to get more. So please, think wisely. Right? And we need a government that is not only knows how to al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu radilakum as-islamadi, not only quoting verses and this and that, but more importantly knows how to administer, knows how to manage the economy. I think this is very important.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Doctor. I think our audience will definitely heed your wise advice. Maybe Sanusi can be able to heed your wise advice if he returns as MB. And implement whatever that you have suggested, but I don't know. I don't think we want that too. But yes, so thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully as we move forward, maybe we can hear more from both of you on your take on PRN or the political scene in Malaysia. 各位观众朋友，非常感谢大家今天收看我们这一段节目。我相信这2位嘉宾的这个分享呢，会让我们更了解，就是这一次就是马来选民他们的选情还有他们的倾向。当然，接下来的节目，我们还会邀请更多不同的学者、嘉宾或者是分析员来讨论这个马来选民的课题。接下来的环节呢，我们有时评人吴其聪，就是景龙呢会跟他谈说，这个刘华才请离事件会影响谁？还有就是西门国政将如何去捕捉？所以这个课题可能接下来的时段还请大家踊跃的就是提问跟留言。好，我把时间交给景龙。